Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our X Factor video podcast series, where we unpack strategies and tactics that can help drive value creation for private equity-owned middle market companies. X Factor is a production of Private Equity CXO, the world's largest community of current and aspiring PE-backed executives. And our mission at CXO is to help ensure private equity's health as an asset class by supporting the vital population of portfolio company operators with connections, content, and access to opportunities. I'm your host, Rob Huxtable. I'm a partner with Falcon. Falcon is a retained executive search firm exclusively focused on serving private equity-backed middle market portfolio companies. We conduct searches for CEO, CFO, and other C-suite assignments, as well as an occasional search for fund-level operating partners and executives. And since 2010, our shop has completed more than 500 retained executive searches for more than 50 different private equity firms. So while I'm no expert on any of these topics, I've had a good ringside seat over the years as I've observed how private equity creates value. So with that, I'm pleased to segue into today's topic, maximizing value creation when integrating add-on acquisitions. And we all know that acquisitions are an essential part of a majority of the investment theses that we see private equity firms employ. And as many of you know, they are a powerful lever for value creation. Among other things, they increase the total addressable market. They present tremendous multiple arbitrage opportunities where, let's say, the platform is trading at 15 times EBITDA, but the add-on acquisitions can be had for a fraction of that number. Well, as soon as they're integrated, they're trading at the new multiple, not to mention post-acquisition synergies. And we all know that larger companies tend to command a greater multiple. So the more add-ons we can do, perhaps the higher the multiple will be when we sell. And that's what we're all here for, is to build a winning company through an intense hold period and realize the fruits of our labor at an exciting liquidity event. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest, Rob Rossi, who is the president of RiseCore. And you can see the spelling above his shoulder. And RiseCore works with private equity-owned portfolio companies to do platform optimization and add-on integration. And Rob and his team have been very busy in the last 2 years alone. They have led 60 different integration projects. So in light of his busy schedule, we're particularly happy that he took time out of his schedule to talk with us today. So Rob, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Huxtable. Since we both have the same first name, I'm really excited to be on X Factor and to talk to you today. Thank you so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have you. So I think most understand what acquisition integration means, but tell us, what do you mean when you say RiseCore also focuses on platform optimization? What does that term mean?
Well, we started doing add-ons, which I think everybody is very clear on what that means. And then what happened is they said, well, we're gonna buy the first company, or we're gonna take two companies and mash them up and create one company as our platform. And what we'd like to do is get those two companies that we brought together, or the first purchase, ready to go, so that our add-ons can be quicker, more efficient, cleaner, and have more growth and scalability. So that's what an optimization is. We come in, we look at the current tech stack, we'll do business process mapping for lead to cash, order to cash, which allows us to really see how these processes flow. They're basically a decision tree horizontal map, and then we make swim lanes for each of the tech stack applications that get touched. As they first get an inquiry, it goes into maybe a CRM tool, then it might go into some kind of quoting or bidding application, and then it might go into an operational type application, and then it'll go ultimately into your financial ERP system for billing. So what we try to do is get all that aligned, get cleaned up data, get the systems and all the interfaces working correctly, so that when we do the first add-on, we're simply tucking it up into a structure that's already optimized, integrated, and delivering good visibility to the business performance.
Okay, makes sense. So I'm certainly familiar with this idea that whether it's a founder-led business with first-time private equity money, or a corporate carve-out, or maybe a business that has already been owned by private equity but has experienced some sort of distress, they need to be made into true platforms, capable of operating at the speed and pace of private equity, and preparedness to do things like integrating acquisitions. So it's almost like finishing school for that portfolio company. Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah, I think so. It really, every deal is a little bit unique, but the goal is to really streamline, scale, take cost out wherever we can, and get the company as efficient as we can. In other words, to optimize it for scale and growth.
Okay, great. So Rob and I thought we'd cover 3 topics today. First being, what are the most important usual suspect integration initiatives that you sometimes see done incorrectly, whether you're fixing a broken integration that had happened before you, or you've just seen from your experience. So we'll talk through that, how to get the basics right and done really well. I'd like to cover also separately, what are some of the areas that you see that are missed and not included in some integration initiatives that are perhaps leaving optimization and value creation dollars on the table. And then the third topic is kind of unpacking utilizing a firm like yours. You know, from my point of view, some of our clients will go it alone on integrating acquisitions, while many of them avail themselves of the services of a firm like RiseCore. So I'd like to talk about kind of why you can be helpful, and if they are going to use a firm like yours, how members can think about vetting them out. So if that sounds like a fair agenda, let's jump into the first topic, which is those basics, those 3 or 4 things that should be no-brainers, but are often perhaps less than fully optimized when you're either fixing a broken integration or observing things from your career.
Great. Yeah, that's a great approach. What I'd like to do is I'm just going to take a little bit different take on it, because I'm sure everybody can chat GTP the top 10 things to do to get an integration right, and that's been talked about a lot. I think what I'm going to do is back into it a little bit differently and talk about some of the implications when it doesn't go right. And we started doing add-ons and got a bunch of those under our belts. And then we were asked to do a couple optimizations. We got those under our belt. And then we said, well, look, here's a couple companies we really need some help with. Could you help us with these issues? And it's always, the question is, when we're working with companies that are having issues, that ultimately were the result of an integration that wasn't completed or done properly. And it's very much like pulling the thread of a woven garment. You start, and as you pull and you pull, the thing starts to unravel until you end up with a pile of thread on the floor. And one example of that is we had a company that was a safety incident reporting or encounter application. So it's a SaaS application, and it gives a variety of different industries the ability to report something's going wrong and we need to address it. So they were getting ready to exit, and the various companies that were considering buying it pulled back because they didn't believe the organic growth that they were demonstrating from their current platform. So they said, look, we need some help with this. They've already pulled and created a master SKU list. They've reconciled all their products and services and brought it together in this master list. But way back when they had these legacy companies, they never addressed those contracts and what they were buying. They just kept billing them in their normal cadence because their contracts were renewable. So we had to go in and through Salesforce, some customer calls, and number one, find out what they were currently using or what services they were getting from the company, because these were legacy contracts and they never got converted over to their current CRM with that data in it. And then we had to come up with a plan to move them from whatever legacy platform or whatever legacy agreement, really wasn't a platform, but it was an agreement, to the new one. That took us 4 or 5 months and cost about $100,000. Fortunately, we got it all done, and they've been able to now re-engage their exit, but it pushed them back a year. So it's pretty profound impact for that miss in the integration of these add-ons that they did in the past.
Well, that's a great point, because we all know that we can't take a successful exit for granted, kind of a house of cards, and any one thing can go wrong to cause valuation to suffer, bids to be less than the sponsor expects, and for that deal not to close. And for our members out there, that is a painful situation when you've worked your tail off for a 5-year hold period for your liquidity event, only to find out that the sale has been postponed. And when they're only postponed a year, you're one of the lucky ones. Sometimes they're kicked out a good bit further than that. So that is a great anecdote.
Another example, and I think this will lead to some of the do's and don'ts when you're doing an integration, was a managed service provider that had integrated over 12 companies in as many months. They came to us and they said, look, we don't have visibility to the white space with our customers to support cross-sell, upsell of our different services. Okay, great. Let's get in there and take a look at that. So we got in and we started pulling the thread. And the first thing we found out was that they hadn't reconciled all their SKUs into one master SKU list. So they had all these different SKUs for different services and products from each of the different companies that they had purchased. And every time you do an acquisition, if you don't do it right or do it completely, and then you do another acquisition, you create a multiplier effect of the problems, because you have 2 problems with the first one, you have 2 more problems with the next one, you have 2 more problems. Pretty soon you have 8, 10, 12 problems that you've got to fix, because they become multiplied as you add these companies together. They didn't have a master SKU list. They just kept adding on third-party providers like firewall, cloud storage, mobile device management tools. So they'd have 3, 4, 5 different suppliers providing these services that were really overlapping, and so they needed more staff to do that. They didn't connect their call centers and their ticketing systems. So they had a call center on the East Coast, they had another call center in Mountain Time, and there was no way to transfer a call from the East Coast over to the Mountain Time, or relay the calls over and move the tickets over, so they get 2 more hours of coverage during normal business hours in the morning and in the evening, because they're operating in 2 time zones. So there was just a plethora of problems like that just came up. We moved them to a more standardized tech stack. We wrote all the integrations. It was almost $1 million and a year of time to get the thing close to being able to operate as an efficient platform. So go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, not that that's not painful enough, but any best guess as to what the integration expense would have been had it been done piecemeal along the way, rather than $1 million to fix?
Yeah, well, normally, when you do an add-on integration, if you do it right, you're spending, $200,000 to $300,000 to do each one, but there's money in the acquisition deal to cover that. Where's the money now going to come from to go back and fix it? It's not part of any fund. It's got to come out of your P&L or directly, or the private equity company has to make an investment.
And nothing ruins a private equity investor's day like follow-on capital. That's not good for anybody's interests. Yeah, those are two vivid pain points. Any other anecdotes that you'd wanted to share that can illustrate how important this stuff is?
I would say, because I think it's interesting to look at different industries. So in the fire and safety industry, where you're doing smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, you're selling parts, you're installing stuff, you're managing and making sure everything's in operating condition on a subscription basis. And they'll normally do regional buys, so they'll buy a certain area of the country and try to blanket that area by aggregating a bunch of add-ons together. And there's not a lot of suppliers in that industry. So when you buy these companies, one of the first things that you want to do is look at who their suppliers are, who your suppliers are, look at your SKU list, because you typically have two different SKU lists because you have two different systems for managing your inventory. And you need to reconcile all that across from each other so that you can get more quantity buying power from your suppliers, and you can centralize and consolidate your suppliers, and that everybody's selling the same parts and the same SKU numbers, and that those have to all be reflected back in your ordering and your CRM system and your quoting system, so that everybody's using the same SKU and product and services list. So that was one of the problems that happened in that integration, is they never consolidated and created a master SKU list. And then they didn't reflect back in the systems that they were using, including the operational ticketing system that the field techs were using. So again, it goes back to with RiseCore, we do business integration. We don't do system integration. And we typically start with a lead to cash business process mapping exercise, where we figure out how the business works, what systems are touched. We identify what your single sources of truth are for the different core buckets of information each company has. So your customer database, your contract database, your billing, your products and services. What are the single sources of truth for each of those? Who maintains them, and what systems do they live in? Because getting everybody on the same page for the process as you're adding more companies, and where the data is going to be, the data hygiene, who's going to manage the data, who's going to make sure it's correct, and then how does the data move? Because if you're a service provider, maybe your contracts are in service trade. Or if you're an MSP, maybe your contracts are in ConnectWise. Or maybe they're in, DocuSign, or maybe they're in Salesforce. They can live in any of those places. They could even live in your financial ERP system. But until everybody decides where those are going to be and what the flow and the process is going to be, you don't really have an optimized or a fully integrated company.
Would it be fair for me to conclude that one of the issues when things don't go as well as they should is that integrations are done piecemeal, that one person or shop will focus on system integration, somebody else will deal with the people side, and et cetera, but no one's taking the holistic business integration approach that you described to make sure it all plays like a symphony?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. A lot of companies are really just, they've grown out of system integrators or system implementers. Maybe they're, a Oracle shop, maybe they're a Sage shop, maybe they're a Microsoft shop. So they just tend to, and we see this all the time, they jump right to the data and start focusing on the data instead of the processes. And anybody that knows a lot about systems knows that systems are really great at supporting a process. But if the process isn't defined, then you never get the value out of that system that you invested in, because it's not enforcing a process and making it more streamlined and efficient. So it's just very critical to start with the business processes, get those aligned. And then when you get those aligned, that starts to bring the people together. And that was one of the things that happened with a window and glass replacement company that we worked with. We got the techs from the field, the management team, the sales people all into a room, and we started mapping out their order to cash process. And as we did this, as we were building this decision trees with the and ifs and the yes, nos, and all the different branches, and then all the systems that were touched, everybody in the room leaned back in their chair and said, wow, this is a mess. There's all kinds of opportunities for details to fall through the cracks. And we've got to do this better. And because we had that multidisciplinary team in there and they could all see the problems, they were all bought into activating the decision. And to me, that was the genius of pulling them together so that they could, everybody see the problem. And they could also see that how them not following through in their process created a headache for somebody down the road in billing or in order fulfillment or in shipping, because their part of the process wasn't completely done correctly. And that's where you start to build some real synergy and teamwork in these companies.
Boy, I'm almost wondering, because data is such a dominant part of the conversation in the landscape, especially within private equity, and everyone's data driven and analytics, you name it, that maybe it's easy to get distracted by the glitzy, sexy appeal of digging into the data, but we don't even realize we're stepping over the prerequisite of having a system infrastructure built from processes that allows us to hang that data onto scaffolding. And I guess that's my big first takeaway from you, is that whatever you do, get the process right first, and then you can go hog wild on data.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And you have data hygiene processes built into the systems, and you also are doing the right integrations. We've gone into Salesforce instances and taken out 1,000 custom fields that haven't been looked at in like 3 or 4 years. You can just run a report in Salesforce and it says, nobody's touched this. Or different integrations where everybody that wrote the integrations between, say, ConnectWise and Microsoft Dynamics CRM, the person that left the company, there's nobody maintaining those integrations. There's nobody that knows whether they're one-way, two-way, who wins in a data collision, all those pieces. And then when you then start pulling data out of the systems, you don't know that you really have good data. And I think, that's the other process, is if you have a process in place, you've defined where your single sources of truth are, you've built in data hygiene process to make sure the data is accurate. Then when you start pulling the data, you're getting accurate data. And it's auditable, it's defendable. That's going to help you managing the business. It's going to give you visibility to the business. You're going to be able to see white space for cross-sell, upsell. And then at exit, you're going to have really defendable processes so you don't get challenged and take a haircut because they don't think the data is right.
Yeah, no doubt. As I'm taking this all in, and I mean this in a complimentary way, your business sounds pretty messy. Sounds like if I walked in the middle of an integration, it would be mid-surgery and there'd be organs and sort of body parts everywhere, and you'd be stitching it all back together. And I can see why some of that tougher work down in the weeds is easy for folks to just decide they're not going to do it if they're doing it on their own and sort of go for the more obvious low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think we've there's an urgency in private equity because of the hold period and just the momentum of the business itself, which we understand and align with completely. But you can't let the urgency of getting something done allow you to do it poorly, because hopefully the examples I gave illustrate the fact that there may not be enough time to do it right, but you're going to have to maybe always go back and fix it, and it's always going to be more expensive. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we've had a couple really great experiences where we got in there, we did the first 2 integrations, we fixed a whole bunch of stuff, And then we found the ensuing next two companies that they acquired and we rolled in actually took only 75% of the time to do the integration because the platform was solid. We defined everything. We knew everything, where everything went. So then it became just a data migration and cleanup process and rolling them into what we've already built. So, you know, that's the other benefit is if you lay down a really great foundation and you want to put a second addition on your house, you can do it because you've got a solid foundation to put it to support it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I've got to believe, like any initiative in private equity, stakeholder alignment is key and tricky and nuanced and involves folks from the sponsor, folks from the platform company, folks from the company being integrated. What kind of observations around stakeholder alignment can you share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things we do is at the very beginning, because RiseCore kicks in before the acquisition closes, so we can help with day one communications. But, you know, when the due diligence is really pretty far down the road and the deal has a high probability of closing. So that's when we get engaged. And we like to read the analysis that talks about the deal abstract. You know, what is the spirit of the deal? Why was this company bought? What was the philosophy? What were the financial projections for the company, so that we can align the integrations with what, you know, the deal team was thinking about when they made the acquisition. And that's really the beginning of the alignment piece for me. The second thing that we do is we have a strategic meeting with the operating partner and the CEO, just those two and our team, typically me and the senior integration lead, just the four of us. And that creates a venue for us to make sure that there's alignment between the CEO and the operating partner from the PE firm. And it gives us a chance to really talk about blocks, issues, communication flows, because we're really down at the street level in the company. And a lot of times when things bubble up to the PE firm, they're not quite accurate as to what's really going on. The PE firm is overseeing the company, but they may not be right into the day-to-day activities. And that's where we get to come up and provide clarity on what the true issues are. The other thing that happens is, particularly if you're in the microcap fund where you're buying founder-led companies, it's difficult for a founder CEO to make the transition to be private equity held. And some people can make that transition and others can't. And that's why making sure that there's an alignment between the new PE owner and the management team is really critical. So that's another thing that we do at RiseCore that I think is really important. You're on mute, Rob.
Thank you. So far we've got process before data. We've got tips on how to drive stakeholder alignment. What else would you urge our audience to consider as they embark on an integration?
Yes, another thing that we do is we become the single point of accountability for all the activities that are going on in the acquisition. And that's important, number one, from an efficiency standpoint, because that means that we can have just one status meeting every week to report back on the progress of what's going on. We use a project management tool that we invite our customers into so they can interact with it. We build out the work streams. We make sure that we work with each of the work stream leads to make sure that we start with a default integration project plan, and then we go through and we groom that to align it with the company. And then we use that to report back to the management team and to the integration team that we're working with. But if for example, maybe they're doing a SOC 2 recertification, or they're doing an IT migration from Google to Microsoft or some other platform. And maybe there's some financial and legal issues that they're working on, or maybe they're doing a consolidation of their facilities or workspaces. We will take all those different components, put them into our project plan, and report back to them so that the management team has visibility to all the different things that are happening, and that we're not going to be responsible for all those pieces and parts, but we're going to report on the progress. And that, to me, is it's a big help to just manage all the things that are going on to get a true integration accomplished.
Yeah, no doubt. So I was almost going to use your foundation analogy and take it a step further to suggest that you're sort of the general contractor. You may not be doing the concrete pouring or the bricklaying, but you may not be overseeing it, responsible for it, but you're a proactive monitor of progress and a dispassionate source of truth that can update that client as to who's on schedule and who's at risk of falling behind, regardless of what kind of messaging they may be getting from those service providers.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's very appropriate. Another thing that I think is important is to have shared success measures. We went in and we developed our own success measures, and we said, okay, if we accomplish these things, then we believe from our perspective this integration will be successful. Which was great. That was a great starting point. But then as we started working with the teams, we realized that it's really great for them to have success measures too, and to report our progress throughout. In our project management tool, we have our milestones or things we've accomplished, and then we have our measures for success as well. And when you have the integration company and the client both having success measures engaged, now we're equally yoked, we're more unified as a team to meet those success measures. And we're going to do everything we can to help you meet yours, and we believe you're going to do everything you can to help us meet ours. It created a real aggregation point for the initiative.
Yeah, sounds great. So before we segue into working with an integration consultant, any final topics or tips that come to mind when it comes to integrating add-ons?
Yeah, I would say that the other thing that we do is we maintain a risk and mitigation matrix, and that allows us to identify risks as we go through the process. We quantify that risk as to, what areas are going to impact. Is it going to delay the schedule? Is it going to create an inefficiency? Is it going to create a problem going forward that would impact the business or growth? And then what's the probability of it happening? And then what's our mitigation plan if it does come to fruition? What are we going to do? So we maintain those, and we love to go through and close those out when we miss them. So that's an important piece we do. I think the other thing is we really try to take some of the lift off of the company. So whenever RiseCore can come in and say, look, we can write those business procedures documents. We have a full suite of RFPs available. So if they need to go out and buy a system to manage their operations or inventory or HRIS or financial ERP system, we already have pre-built RFPs that go out to the supplier. They can then fill it out according to, we have this, it's in the pipeline. We use this for a third-party provider, or we don't have it at all. We score all of that. Then we add a weighting factor to all the different aspects that we're looking at, so that we have an empirical measure of the fit that this supplier has for the need according to the RFP. And then when they come in and do a discovery call or a product demo, then we have another scorecard there where we rate them. And that way we have empirical measures for a software selection process, and they're all ready to go. We'll customize some of the questions according to maybe the industry, but we've got a regular process to help people get the best system for the processes they have in front of them.
Mm-hmm. And so, as our audience knows, we're trying to avoid being overly commercial, but I think this is an important point to raise on the benefits of using a firm like RiseCore. So what comes to my mind immediately based on this conversation, in no particular order, is, benefit one, let management continue to primarily focus on driving the business forward and its overall strategy, and avoid getting overly distracted by the integration initiative and pulled too far into the weeds. That seems like a clear benefit. In addition to that, this notion that, you may be missing an opportunity with your integration. It may not come back to hurt you, but what if it missed out on capturing some additional EBITDA or some additional synergies? That can pay for itself. And then one of your anecdotes early on was the delayed exit process, which put the entire investment outcome at risk. Certainly using a shop like yours helps eliminate the risk of that eventuality. What else do you have your clients telling you, Rob, that, they're saying, glad we use you, and this is why we won't do it on our own?
Yeah, that's a great point and a perfect segue. One of the other things I want to talk about is many companies say, well, we'll just do it on our own. We'll do our own integrations. And they walk into this process with a couple, intuitively appealing pros. One, we have a dedicated integration team within our company. And because they're in our company, we have direct control. And because they're in our company and we're on their payroll, it's probably going to be a lower cost solution. And because they do a couple of these, there's going to be repeatable results. All those things sound really appealing when you're standing in front of it. But then as you start to implement this process, a couple realities hit. And the first reality, which I think everyone will appreciate, is these deals never close when you think they're going to close. There's always legal issues, maybe some data discovery that needs to be done. There's negotiations and whatnot. And most deals that are targeted to get closed July 1st end up getting closed August 15th, August 30th. So you have this non-productive time now where your integration team really isn't a dedicated team. They're on your payroll, they're on your P&L. So now you have to find other things for them to do in the interim because there's a hiatus in closing the deal. Well, now you don't have a dedicated team anymore. Secondly, that team is going to have a built-in bias. They're not going to have the objectivity because this is the way we do it here. The company that you're buying may have better processes, but you get that not invented here bias, and therefore you're not really neutral in deciding what is really the best way to do a business process or a solution or a product bundling, so that you have this built-in bias. Then second thing is, or the third thing is, now you're carrying them on your P&L, where normally the deals that we're involved with, there's money allocated to the integration. It's below the line. You pay that money. It's an episodic cost, and then it's not going to carry forward with you in your P&L on your monthly statement. And then I think finally, you don't have the benefit of working in, all the different types of companies: light manufacturing, SaaS, business services, franchises, B2B, B2C, all the different things that we get involved with. So you have a very limited scope. It's almost like a security person that just works for one company. That person doesn't have the benefit of working in a data center where there's all kinds of different attacks coming through, all kinds of different industries. There's healthcare, there's legal, there's financial. You have to be at the top of your game to be a security expert in all those different areas. So these companies are thinking they're going to do their own integrations. If you're buying companies that have maybe 5 or 10 people, sure, I think that makes total sense. You're not going to make that investment. But for mid-cap and larger companies, I think it's really more prudent to invest in a third party. Let them come in episodically as experts, get this done, and then not carry that on your P&L.
And I don't know what number, if there is one, you'd assign, but I'll guess there are more than 100 things that can go wrong on an integration. And so why not get some help from a shop like yours or another qualified provider that's done dozens of these per year and has learned from each one of those instances. Okay, terrific. Well, Rob, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. Any final thoughts for the audience?
I would just coattail on that last thing you said. We always have a handoff meeting. We always do a retrospect to say what went right, what went wrong, how could we do this better. We have a standardized framework and methodology that we apply to every project, and we adhere to that in every single project. We're on 2.5 version of that, so we reflect back on it and make it better. And I think that's the other thing that helps us is as we do these different companies, we go back and we say, that didn't really work as smoothly as we'd like. Let's change that up a bit. Let's make this better so that we're continually improving and getting better and really doing a better job of meeting the demands of our PE customers.
Yeah, great. And, whether folks in the audience are going to reach out to Rob or try it on their own, certainly if you do it on your own or use another firm, the things that RiseCore are doing, it should be front and center with your own approach. But at the same time, I can personally vouch for the fact that Rob and I share a couple clients, and you'd certainly be in good hands if you found yourself working with RiseCore. So on that note, thank you so much, Rob, for taking us through the ins and outs of one of the most important things that a portfolio company will do during its hold period, which is integrate an add-on or several of them. And we'll see you out there in the marketplace, and everyone in the audience. See you next time on X Factor. Thank you.
Thanks very much.